Joseph, you're falling down on the job, sir. You didn't tell me. Okay. The second thing will happen is we'll top off our glycogen stores. Okay? Glycogen stores is basically this. A glucose hooked to a glucose hooked to a glucose hooked to a glucose hooked to a glucose. And on the very end, we put a phosphate. And that phosphate keeps it from slipping outside the cell. Okay? Got to have glucagon for that. Now, there are a few specialized cells, like the kidney tubules and such, that can break it down. But for the most part, no, got to have glucagon, okay? So that's the glycogen stores, and we have about 250. And we talked about, in an average person, about 250 grams. It's mainly stored in the liver or in the skeletal muscles. And we talked about, I used to run a lot of half marathons, and about mile number 13, oh my gosh, it gets really hard. All of a sudden, you're like, this is getting hard, okay? After so many miles, you burn up the stored glycogen, and you're burning almost total fat, okay? And so, glycogen stores, that's the second thing that happens. The third thing that happens is this, that those carbs will be converted into fat, right? And the first thing is triglycerides, fat in the blood, right? Fat in the blood, and also fat in the liver, right? We talked about non-alcoholic fatty liver, which is at epidemic proportions. When I got out of high school about 40-something years ago, no one had fatty liver, but now it's the most common cause of cirrhosis, fatty liver, okay? Especially among diabetics, but anyway, right? So that's what's going to happen. One of these three things is going to happen. First, it'll raise our blood sugar up to what it should be, okay? Second, we top off those glycogen stores. That is why if we go jog for 15 or 20 minutes, or we go for a walk for 15 minutes, and we do that every day. Yeah, don't let that happen again. Everybody turn your cell phone off, please. Okay? Everybody check, right? Because in the high school, they're going to start making you put it in a basket in the back of the room, and I'm thinking about going to that myself. But anyway, okay? Glycogen stores, okay? That's why when you go and you go exercise for 15 or 20 minutes and you're so proud of yourself and you do that every day, and guess what? You don't lose any weight. You don't lose any weight because you top off your blood sugar and then you re-top off your glycogen stores, right? So to really burn some fat, to lose some weight, you need to go about 40 minutes or longer. That's when you really start burning more fat. When you first start exercising, you're mainly burning your blood sugar and then your glycogen and a little bit of fat. And the longer you exercise, the more fat you're going to burn because you've burned this up and that. So that's why you need to go at least 40 minutes if you're trying to lose any weight. Because if you do it shorter than that, if you're doing 15 or 20 or whatever, no, you're just going to deplete your glycogen. And then you go home and have supper. Guess what? You're going to top off your glycogen again. See, so that's not happening. To lose fat, you must go for a longer period of time, right? 45 minutes or an hour and such, okay? Now, if you're not eating hardly any carbs, then yes, you're going to be what's called fat adapted, okay? And you'll burn fat much sooner. But anyway, and such. But it's what's going to happen, yes? And this fat too, it's going to accumulate here, right? Men get it here, right? Women much more so here and here. Why? Right? Because this is called android, that's called gynecoid. It's hormones. It's the testosterone and the estrogen. It determines where we're going to gain fat at. Right? Okay? Okay. Okay. We talked a little bit, remember, about the fat-soluble vitamins are A, D, E, K, and also B12. Yes, remember, we said that's the only one of the water-soluble that we can store, right? And when our B12 gets low, we get pernicious anemia. Yes? the C and the B complex, right? Those are all water soluble. If you take too much of them, you pee it out, okay? So, but anyway, these are the fat soluble and the water soluble, right? Now, anabolic, a lot of this is reviewed. Anabolic versus catabolic. Anabolic or anabolism means, right, to build you up. It will pump you up. Anabolic steroids, right? That's what they do, yes? Catabolic, to break down, yes? Right? I was so mad. I ordered the Sonic burger with mustard. I get home. Yeah, they put mustard on one side. They put mayonnaise on the other side. I said, I want a Sonic burger, cheeseburger with mustard. And they put mayonnaise on it. I'm eating it. This is not good. What is up with that? Right? Jeez. Did the person even graduate middle school that did that? Right? Jeez. But anyway, I don't know. Frustrating, right? Yes, and I was hungry. I ate it anyway, so sorry. Anyway, okay, here we go. Sorry, got off the subject, right? Okay, now we need to talk about the cool stuff, the interesting stuff, the chemistry, the biochemistry. Okay, now way back to, I think it was chapter 7 or 8 or 9. I can't remember. Right? We talked about the currency of the body. What we burn is adenosine triphosphate, ATP, right? Remember, adenosine from the amino acid adenine, and this is a phosphate, phosphate, phosphate. And when we break one off, it goes from being ATP to ADP, right? There's only 2 of them on them, right? Oh, by the way, we don't mention it, but you can do the same thing, and it'll be AMP, okay? But anyway. And when we split this, we break the bonds, we get energy from doing that. And that's what the whole thing is about. And this amazing body, the original recycler, does this. Sticks another phosphate, phosphorylation, right? Sticks another phosphate on. Oh, by the way, sticks another phosphate on. ATP, ready to rock and roll again. And the wheels on the bus go round and round, right? Yeah. Okay, so this happens over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Yes? Okay, but let's go back to that chapter. Remember we said we got about 6 seconds stored. Yes? About 6 seconds of stored ATP. That's not very much. You can't get very far in 6 seconds, can you? Right? And then when we go longer than that, we go to direct phosphorylation, right? And that skeletal muscle, creatine phosphate, right? And so we have an enzyme, creatine kinase. ACE means it's an enzyme. Split things apart. Creatine kinase splits it into creatine. The phosphate goes from the ADP, adenosine di, to adenosine triphosphate. So we just made another ATP molecule. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. And that will go, between this and this, it's about 15 seconds, okay? So another 9 or 10 seconds here, 6 seconds stored, another 9 or 10 seconds. Between these two, we have about 15 seconds. But if our exercise lasts longer than 15 seconds, then we go into the anaerobic pathway. Anaerobic. What does an mean? A or an means what? Not or without, right? Not or without is what I was taught. Anaerobic, right? Anaerobic. A-N-E-R-O-B-I-C. Aerobic. Dr. Kenneth Cooper, MD, from Dallas, came up with that word aerobic, meaning we're burning oxygen, right? We think aerobic exercise, we're jogging, right? Or we're rowing, yes? That's aerobic exercise, right? That means we're burning oxygen. But this is the anaerobic pathway, right? And the anaerobic pathway is glycolysis. Glycolysis, glyco for sugar, lysis, to split, to break. We break sugar down, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute, right? Breaking the sugar down, the glycolysis, glycolysis, lysis, to split or break, right? Glycolysis, that happens next, and that will go for about 30 or 40 seconds, yes? So if we add the 15 and the 30 or 40, we're getting close to 1 minute. Oh, by the way, if you run the 400 meters, about how long does it take if you're really good? 55, 54. If you're college, 50, yes. What I'm getting at is this. Boom, yes. You can go full guns for about 50 seconds, but after that, you can't go that fast. You drop down, right? When you get past that anaerobic pathway and splitting that sugar, when we split sugar, we get 2 molecules of ATP net, okay? And when we go farther than that, when the race is longer than that, that's when we go into the aerobic pathway, right? Aerobic pathway, aerobic meaning we're going to burn oxygen, right? We're going to burn oxygen and give off CO2, yes? How long can you do aerobic exercise? Well, somebody take a guess. I mean, just step up to the plate, please. How long can you do aerobic exercise?
Hours.
Hours. Hours or days. I mean, you can go, right? That, what is it? That one up there they run in Colorado where they run up and down the 100-mile, right? And they do it in like 30 hours or so, right? Running 100 miles, yes. So you can do that as long as you're breathing in and out, getting that oxygen in, you can do it. When you run a marathon, are you running as fast as you run 400 meters at the same pace?
No.
No. You're a lot faster than 400 meters, aren't you? Right? And at the end of that 5K or 10K or half marathon, you sprint at the end, right? And you go back into this anaerobic. So you can go full guns, but only for a short amount of time, so don't start your kick too soon, because you'll lose the race. Ask me how I know. But anyway, okay? Right? But this aerobic pathway is called cellular respiration. In the cells, don't you like that, in that acute mitochondria there? Yes. In the mitochondria, we're making a bunch of ATP. Now, direct phosphorylation, we're only going to make 1 molecule of ATP for every creatine phosphate we split, okay? Now, glycolysis, we're going to make 2, okay? And in this cellular respiration, we're going to make like 28, and I left out Krebs cycle right down here, but we'll talk about that in a minute, okay? So 28 versus 2, that's way different, right? That's why you can run for hours and hours and hours and hours, but at full steam, you can maybe run a minute, maybe, right? If you're a super trained athlete and that's all your specialty is, maybe you could run a minute and a half. But for we mere mortals, about a minute at full back guns is all you can go, right? Yes. Okay. But anyway, that's a refresher on what we talked about in chapter 8 or 9. Okay. So basically, our next thing is we're going to relate what we eat, making ATP, and how we make all this ATP. Okay. So the macros, right? The macros. There are 3 macros, right? Protein, carbs, and fat. Those are the 3 macros, right? Everything we eat is either protein, fat, or carbohydrate, right? Those are the 3 macros, they call them, right? Now, there's a lot of micro, if you talk about minerals, we need trace minerals, a tiny amount of this or that. But the macros, I always talk about protein, carbs, and fat, right? So, anabolic, in purple I wrote the anabolic, right? We can take protein, break it down to amino acids, and make protein out of it, right? That's what the bodybuilders want to do, make protein, okay? That's the most common thing that we use when we break down protein is to make the structure of our body, yes? Okay? That is an anabolic process. If you lift weights enough, you will probably gain some muscle, okay? And a lot of that has to do with genetics. All those guys in the Mr. America and this and that and Arnold, they can do that because they're genetically programmed for that, right? Yes? Could Arnold beat me in a foot race? No way. No way. Sprint, middle distance, marathon, Arnold wouldn't have a chance against me, right? Yes? but I can't lift heavy weights like he can. See, I have different genetics than him. Okay? But anyway, anabolic, carbs. We can take those carbohydrates, those sugar, and hook it together. Boom, 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 and store it in the liver, and store it in the skeletal muscle, and that's glycogen, right? And when we're exercising and we go through this process, then we start to burn that stored glycogen, right? That's why I say you need to exercise for 30 or 40 minutes before you really start burning much fat, okay? Because for the first 30 or 40 minutes, you're mainly burning glycogen. And then you go home and you eat, and guess what? You tank up again, right? Now, fats. We can take the fats and we can make fats and fatty acids, right? We can stick it in the blood, right? Triglycerides, yes. We can stick it in the liver. If we get too much, right, then we'll get fatty liver and such. Or we can stick them around here where fats normally accumulate on our body if we get too much, right? Yes. And so those are all anabolic. We make protein, we make glycogen here and here, or we make fats in the liver or there, okay? So that's all anabolic. We break those things down and then we build our body up with that. Now, the other part of that is catabolic. Catabolic, to break down, yes? We take protein and we break it down to amino acids, right? Remember, that's the stomach's job. What's the main job of the stomach? To break down protein, right? That's the main job of the stomach. Remember, it's super acid, pepsinogen to pepsin. Break up that steak you just ate, right? Okay? Okay? Now, the glucose we'll send through glycolysis, sugar splitting. We'll make energy out of it, okay? ATP, right? The byproduct of glycolysis, we're going to talk about it in one second, is acetyl-CoA, and then we'll go through Krebs cycle and then on to oxidative phosphorylation. We're going to talk about each one of those individually, but we're looking at the overview. Fats, right? We can convert fats to glycerol and fatty acids, and we can send those through. Remember, the liver is amazing. The liver does about 1,000 different chemical reactions. The liver is amazing what it does. Don't ever do things to damage your liver, because way bad. But anyway, yes, ask David Crosby. Trust me. Okay? But anyway, okay? Glycerol and fatty acids. Okay? Glycolysis, the sugar splitting, the end product of the glycolysis. That end product goes through Krebs cycle. We make a little bit more ATP, and then we go into oxidative phosphorylation. And this oxidative phosphorylation, called cellular respiration, right? Our cells are breathing. Well, they're not really breathing, but they're burning oxygen, okay? Cellular respiration, okay? So we're going to talk about first glycolysis, then Krebs cycle, and then oxidative phosphorylation, okay? Okay. Okay, glycolysis, right? Glycolysis. Glycose, sugar, lysis, splitting. Sugar splitting, okay? Glycolysis. Number one, that's this right here, the anaerobic process. It's anaerobic. Make sure you get that. It's anaerobic, meaning you don't need oxygen. Don't gotta have oxygen. It's anaerobic, okay? You don't have to breathe oxygen to burn sugar, okay? Glycolysis. Sugar, I believe it's that's a 6. C6, H12O6, right? And so what happens is, this sugar, and there's 10 different steps, right? if you're taking biochemistry, then you get to learn the 10 different steps. That's not important to me, okay? What's important to me is that you go through these 10 different chemical reactions, da-da, 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 and the end product is pyruvic acid, 2 molecules of pyruvic acid. Okay, we said sugar's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 carbons. The circles represent a carbon molecule, by the way. Okay, now pyruvic acid, right, has 3 carbon molecules, right? Okay, but there's 2 of them. Okay, Joseph, this is tough. Multiplication. 3 carbon molecules times 2.
6.
6! Give that man a gold star, right? Our 6 got split. Oh, what is this called? Glycolysis, sugar splitting, right? So we end up with 2 pyruvic acids. That's the end product of glycolysis, right? The sugar splitting, yes? Okay. Now, I want to tell you about how much energy we get from this when we split our sugar, right? Okay. First off, I'm going to say this. In order to split sugar, it takes 2 molecules of ATP. Okay? So I'm going to put a minus there. It takes 2 molecules of ATP, right? You have to prime the pump. What in the heck does that mean, right? In the olden days, they had the pump with the handle, right? Yes. And in the head of that thing, there was a piece of leather, and the leather needed to be wet. And when the leather was wet, it created a suction, and it pulled water up out of the ground. Okay? But the problem being is, sometimes the leather dried out. So it was very common, people would leave a coffee can or something with a lid on it, or a glass jar with a lid on it with water in it. So if the water wouldn't come out, you pick the jar up and you pour that in the top of the pump, and it gets the leather wet. And when the leather's wet, it takes a little bit, but then you can pump water. You had to prime the pump, right? Whenever you start your lawnmower, you put it on C for choke, right? You have to choke it a little bit, give it a little extra, right? Yes? Old-timey, when I was a kid riding motorcycles, you do this. You got to blip it a little bit, and then kick it and give it a little gas, prime it a little bit, right? Okay? In the same way, it takes 2 molecules, but you end up with 4 molecules of ATP, right? So the net is, okay, Joseph, 4 molecules of ATP is what you get, but it took 2 molecules to make that ATP. Yeah. So the net is 4 minus 2. Carry the 1. 2. 2! There you go. Man, he's batting 1,000, that Joseph. Okay? So you end up with 2 molecules of ATP. That is what the net is. That's not very much, is it? 2 molecules of ATP. Well, how long can you go? Oh, 30 to 40 seconds, by the way. But anyway, that's not very much, right? That's not very much. Okay, but anyway, the whole thing is, we end up with this pyruvic acid, 2 molecules of this 3-chain carbon. And what do is, well, by the way, then shows up B5, pantothenic acid, right? A form of it called coenzyme A, right? And so what happens is this is the next step in the process, right? That 3-carbon chain, guess what we do? We knock one off, and we end up with a 2-carbon chain hooked to B5, coenzyme A, right? And oh, by the way, guess what this carbon ends up becoming? What's that going to become? Huh?
Is it carbon dioxide?
Carbon dioxide, yes ma'am. CO2, right? It's a waste product. But anyway, right, this one's going to become a CO2. But anyway, B5, pantothenic acid, okay, right? So, the next process is called Krebs cycle for Hans Krebs, okay, right? the genius that figured out Krebs cycle. They named it after him. It's also called the tricarboxylic acid cycle, and this over here is citric acid. It's also called the citric acid cycle. But anyway, TCA cycle, Krebs cycle, tricarboxylic acid cycle, whatever you want to call it. It's Krebs. Mainly people just say, oh, it's Krebs cycle, right? So what happens is this. 1, 2, 3, 4. We got a 4-carbon chain here, right? And guess what? It gets hooked up thanks to CoA, these two. Okay, I'm really stressing it. 1, 2, 3, 4 plus 2 is 6-carbon chain, citric acid, right? And so what happens is the 2 plus the 4 make a 6-carbon chain, citric acid, and then we split one off, then we split another one off, and when we split those off, guess what we get? Carbon dioxide. Yes, we get carbon dioxide. It's a waste gas, right? Yes. And we end up with, we come around, there's 10 chemical reactions in here. You don't need to memorize 10 chemical reactions for me. That's not important. But just realize, 4 plus 2, 6 to 5 to 4. 4 plus 2 to 6 to 5 to 4 to, right? And it goes round and round and round and round. Yes? But here's the thing. We make, in this cycle, 2 molecules of ATP. 2 molecules of ATP. Oh, darn. In glycolysis, we made 2. Now in Krebs cycle, we're making 2 more. Okay? I'm counting on you, Joseph.
4.
4! Man, that guy, he's batting 1,000. Okay? We end up with 2 4 molecules. We split that sugar, then we send the byproducts, pyruvic acid, through Krebs cycle, and we get 2 more, 4. That's still not very much, is it? Right? That's still not very much. Oh, by the way, right? 30 to 40 seconds is not very long. Well, here's the thing. When we're splitting that, we put the 2 and 4 together, we get 6. And then we split that into 3 and 3, 6, right? And we go through the steps of Krebs cycle, and we end up with, when we split the CO2s off, here's the thing. There's a chemical, NAD and FAD, NADH, FADH, okay? NAD, okay? Guess what NAD is? NAD's niacin, right? I can't remember if it's B3 or B4 or whatever, but anyway, it's niacin, right? Nicotinamide, yes? Okay? Niacin, okay? Now, there's another one, FAD, F-A-D-H, F-A-D-H, FAD, right? That's riboflavin, yes? You heard of that one too, right? Riboflavin, yes? They're B vitamins, yes? NAD and FAD are the water boys. They carry the hydrogen molecule. So out of Krebs cycle, what do we want out of Krebs cycle? We want the hydrogen, because we're going to make a bunch of ATP, a bunch out of it, right? But you got to have the water boy carry the water, and the water is the hydrogen molecule, okay? And so what happens is this. The end products, Krebs cycle goes round and round and round. We make a little bit, 2 ATPs, but the main thing we want is the hydrogens, right? And again, NAD and FAD, niacin and riboflavin, they're the water boys. They carry the hydrogen. That is why, 5-hour energy, right? Take all them B vitamins. It's supposed to give you energy, right? That's why, because guess what, right? That's B5, pantothenic acid. That's niacin. That's I think riboflavin is B2, but anyway, right? Yes? That's why that's supposed to give you energy, because it's the B vitamins that do all the water carrying here. Yes? Right? Does it really work? 5-hour energy and this and that? No, it's a bunch of caffeine, right? I'd rather drink a Dr. Pepper personally. But anyway, but that's the theory behind it. And oh, by the way, do we need a whole bunch of those vitamins? No, they get used over and over and over and over and over again. They pick up a hydrogen, walk over here you go. And you pick up a hydrogen, here you go. Right? We need very little, not a lot, right? And you take too much, you'll injure your nerves. But anyway, okay? NAD and FAD, okay? Now, we're getting to the good part, the amazing part, okay? But note, 10 chemical reactions here, 10 chemical reactions here. Everything has to go da-da, 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 da-da for it to work, okay? 10 and 10, right? No, I'm not going to ask you, Joseph. I'm sorry. Madison, what is 10 plus 10?
20.
20! 20 chemical reactions to get here, and we got the NAD and FAD carrying the water, the hydrogens, right? Okay, now, this picture right here, this is the picture of a mitochondria, if you hadn't figured it out, right? We draw it like a potato. And this little square is if I blew the picture up, and this is it right here, okay? Right there and there, all right? So, we draw it looking like a potato. It really actually looks way like that. But anyway, but it's easy for us to understand that, okay? Right? Especially if you exercise a lot, you got a lot of super duper mitochondria, right? That's what I want. A lot of super duper, super functioning mitochondria, yes? To produce a lot of ATP to do a lot of things, okay? Here we go, right? Now, you probably noticed these are phospholipids, right? Just like your cell membrane, yes? This membrane right here, yes, is this inner membrane of the mitochondria called the cristae, C-R-I-S-T-A-E, the cristae, right? Yes? And it's made out of phospholipids, okay? It's made out of phospholipids, right? And on that membrane, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4. 5. They're called cytochromes, right? Cytochromes. Okay, right? Got a lot of chrome on that hardly. Yes, it's metal, right? Real chrome is, not the plastic, shiny looking stuff that looks like it, okay? So these are protein molecules that have metal on them. That's why they're called cytochromes, okay? This is called oxidative phosphorylation. It's called cellular respiration. And when I learned it, it was called the cytochrome cycle. But anyway, here we go. NADH plus, he's carrying the water. He's carrying the hydrogen. And what's going to happen to this hydrogen? We want ATP. We want a bunch of ATP, right? What's going to happen to this hydrogen is this. At this first cytochrome, this amazing body of ours, I think of it like this. We're going to split the atom, right? Only there's not going to be an explosion, right? What happens is this. The proton, the positive, right? Remember hydrogen, here we go. Right? One proton, right? Remember hydrogen, one proton, one electron, right? Yes? No neutrons. It's very special, no neutrons. But anyway, one proton, one electron. So this amazing body of ours is going to take that hydrogen molecule and split it. And this, the positive, the proton, is going to go outside here. Okay? Outside the membrane to the outer membrane. Yes? Oh, by the way, what happens to the electron? The electron is going to get passed from cytochrome number 1 to 3 to 4. Okay? FAD goes to number 2, FADH, right? FADH2. Okay? It's carrying the water 2. It's carrying the hydrogen 2 to cytochrome number 2, right? There's an enzyme 2, ubiquinone, coenzyme Q, but we won't talk about that. But anyway, okay? So what happens is this. This electron is passed from here to here to here, okay? And every time that happens, we get some energy. If all the energy was released at one time, go boom, we have a boom. But little by little, the energy, that electron is getting passed, okay? Cytochrome number 3, cytochrome number 4, guess what? they're pumping the hydrogens out, right? The protons out, right? The protons, right? And oh, by the way, proton is positively charged and electron is negatively charged, right? So when we pump all those protons out here, guess what? This outer part of the membrane ends up positively charged, right? And then you got your membrane, and all these electrons are negatively charged, right? And because they're negatively charged, you're going to get a negative charge here. Okay? Right? So, this process goes da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da until we get to cytochrome number 5, the most amazing one. Right? Cytochrome number 5 is where we actually make the ATP. Yes? And what has happened is this. We got all these protons here, right? It's negatively charged under here because of the electron. And this, number 5, is called ATP synthase. What does it mean to synthesize something? To make something, right? To synthesize, right? Yes? Okay. So what happens is this. This is a machine, right? Oh, by the way, I have one just like this. And when I start doing the Bowflex, right, I got my sneakers on, and I got my shorts on, and you start lifting weights, you start sweating really quick, right? So there's nobody around, so I don't have my shirt on. I'm sweating, and I turn one of these on, and it looks like this. Right? Just like that. And oh, by the way, it goes like that. Yes? So what happens is there's an armature here, right? Yes? And there's a rotor right here. And guess what the rotor does? It spins around. It's called a rotor, right? And oh, by the way, what I didn't mention, look at this. Right? Positive here. Negative here. What does that look like to you? Right? I'll tell you what it looks like. It looks like this. What is that? It's a battery, right? I was watching a video yesterday and the guy was talking about this. It's a battery! And when we get older, our battery doesn't work so good. It's not so strong. It's our battery. It's our energy system, right? That's what he was saying. That's basically what it is, right? Battery, right? You got the plus over here and the minus over here. Yes? And if you take a pair of pliers and you go on a car battery, one on the plus, one on the minus, what happens? Sparks, right? Yes? Okay? So what happens is, when this spins, it draws ATP into the rotor, right? The positive from the proton, the negative from the negative charge in here. We have certain, what would you call them? Not receptors, I forget what they're called. Anyway, as this thing spins round and round and round and round and round, the ADP is drawn in and the phosphate is drawn in, the chemical reaction occurs, and we make ATP, and we make 28 molecules of ATP. 28, right? So from 1 molecule of sugar, we make 2 plus 2 plus 28. Okay, all right. This is going to be a tough one, Madison, but anyway, I think you're up for it. 2 plus 2 plus 28 equals
32.
32! 32, right? We totally break down 1 sugar molecule and we get 32 molecules of ATP. That's the total. That's our best guess, give or take. That's our best guess, right? But notice, right, in the mitochondria, we're making a bunch, 28 molecules, right, of ATP. And that is why we can run for hours and hours and hours and hours, right? Now, we can't run at full speed, right? But we can run at a pretty good clip for hours and hours and hours because this is going round and round and round and round and round. And oh, by the way, this process too, we can burn fats and we can burn fats, and if we just have to, the body doesn't like to because it's expensive, right? Yes, right? My in-laws, we took them to the steakhouse for their 50th anniversary, right? It cost me about $200. Yes, uh-huh. Do I go there very often? No, it's expensive, right? Our body doesn't like to take protein and make energy out of it. Our body likes to take protein and make muscles out of it, right? But if I'm starving, if I'm on a hunger strike and I'm not eating anything and not eating anything, I'm going to burn up all my fat. I'm going to get skinny, skinny, skinny. And oh, by the way, little by little, I'm going to start burning up my muscle too, right? The biggest loser, they cut their food way, 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 way down, right? And what do they make them do? They make them run so they don't break down their muscles, right? Right? Because you don't want to break down muscle. You want to lose fat. You don't want to lose muscle, right? Yes. And so, anyway, we're going to talk more about that gluconeogenesis. Yes? I guess y'all didn't get that one. Yes. Right? A fan, right? You hook the cord up. That's where the electrons come from. And what happens is there's an armature like this, and there's a rotor, and when I turn it on, guess what? The blade spins. Right? Yes? So this machine in our body, ATP synthase, cytochrome number, let's see, cinco, number 5, right? Yes? Goes spinning around, 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 around. And it sucks in the ADP and the phosphate, and it hooks them together, right? And oh, by the way, we get some waste products, we get some CO2, and we get some water. When the protons come through, they get hooked up with oxygen, and we make metabolic water. It's a waste product. Yes? Okay? So, wow, is that not amazing? In every cell of our body, we have these mitochondria that can just crank out. Is that not amazing that we take a hydrogen molecule and we do this to it, and we put it back together, and we get energy out of that by breaking the bonds, right? We make a battery. Literally, the guy was a PhD in neuroscience. He was, oh, it's our battery, right? And when we're young, those mitochondria work really good. And when we're old, they don't work so good, right? When you're young, you have a lot of energy. When you're older, you don't have so much, right? That's why I'm running down. We're 3/4 of the way through the semester, and I'm pretty much getting to the rundown point now, right? But anyway, okay? So, amazing. It's just amazing. They call this the power plant of the cell, or such, the mitochondria, the mighty mitochondria, right? Now, if you want good mitochondria to make a lot of ATP, what do? Exercise. You do aerobic exercise, right? And oh, by the way, you got to lift some weights, which takes a sudden power, right? Yes. And that will make you have more mitochondria. The more mitochondria you have, the more power you can produce, right? You know, years ago, I would drive the truck 7 hours, jump out of the truck, spend 10 hours climbing a mountain, coming back down, then I jump in the truck again and drive 7 hours home without a rest, right? And such. Now I'm getting older. Now I'm going to hike in over the edge of over the pass. lay down on the ground for a couple hours before I go to the top and come back, so I won't be so tired. I'm not as young as I used to be. But anyway, I still have really good mitochondria from exercise. Okay? Yes. Amazing. Okay, now let's go through it again one more time, what I need you to get. Yes? Number one, you need to remember, right? That's 6 seconds. Then you go into the direct phosphorylation, and then you go into the anaerobic pathway. That's the glycolysis. That's what we're talking about. It is anaerobic, very important. Anaerobic. We don't have to have oxygen. We can turn it on for 30 or 40 seconds. We're splitting that sugar. Then we have to go into the aerobic pathway, okay? The aerobic pathway. The aerobic pathway is cellular respiration and such, okay? Now, glycolysis, remember, we're taking the 6 carbon sugar, we're breaking it down. What we want is the 2 pyruvic acid molecules, put the sugar down the middle, right? B5, coenzyme A, hooked up here, whoop, through Krebs cycle. We made 2 more. We made 2 up here, we made 2. Remember, we made 4, but it took 2 to prime the pump, so the net is 2, right? The net is 2 ATP molecules, that's the net. Okay, but anyway, Krebs cycle. We go through 10 chemical reactions. We get 2 more molecules of ATP, right? Yes. Oh, by the way, Krebs cycle is anaerobic. Anerobic. Anaerobic. Don't gotta have oxygen. It's also anaerobic. Yes? Right? Now, this is taking place inside here in the mitochondria, inside the mitochondria, right? The end products, basically, NAD and FAD. We get 3 NAD molecules and 1 FAD molecules. NAD is the niacin, FAD is the riboflavin, the vitamins, the B vitamins, NAD and FAD, and the CoA is pantothenic acid B5, right? And these 2 are the water boys. They carry the hydrogen, right? They carry the hydrogen to the cytochromes. Cytochromes, right? The inner membrane, every time it shuttles that electron, some energy is released. It's not all released at one time, okay? The proton is pumped out. These are proton pumps, right? That makes the outer part of the crista, the outer membrane, positively charged, the inner membrane, because the electrons are negatively charged, and that's what makes I call it the battery, right? And number 5 is very special. It's very special because it's a little machine. It spins round and round and round and round, just like my fan motor spins round and round and round, right? And it draws in the ADP, and the phosphate, gets them hooked together and spits out ATP, and it spits out a lot, 28 molecules, right? So when we take one molecule of sugar, we got 2 from glycolysis, 2 molecules from Krebs cycle, and 28 from oxidative phosphorylation. So 2 plus 2 plus 28 is 32, okay? 32, right? So, amazing, right? It's amazing. This is at least 10 chemical reactions. Every step has to be there to end up with this. This is at least 10 chemical reactions. If you look in the index of your back of your book, it'll have every step. And if you're studying biochemistry, you'll probably have to study every step. But that's not important to me, right? But that's another about 10 chemical reactions, right? So you got 20 chemical reactions. And then we got the water boys, NAD and FAD, carrying the hydrogens, splitting the hydrogens, cytochrome 1, 2, 3, 4. 5 is the superstar, ATP synthase. And that's cranking out the ATP. Okay? That's where we get ATP to go surfing, to drive a car, to ride a motorcycle, to jump up and down, right? And have a lot of fun. Yes? Right? It's amazing. It's just amazing. That our body can do that in every cell. Can do this, right? Yes. Okay. Any questions? Right? Okay. I'm going to say it. Right? So, on the one hand, you got to decide 20 chemical reactions, 5-sided chromosome. Okay, this evolution is amazing. How could it do that? Or, wow, that's amazing design. Right? You got to decide for yourself. I'm not telling you what to think. Right? I know what I think. 10 chemical reactions. And one chemical reaction does nothing. You have to have all 10, and all of these to do this. One step, one reaction, one of these missing, it would have worked. See? So, pretty amazing. Yes. But anyway, okay. All right, we need to talk about a few more topics. Yes? This is the part right here. Okay? Please, I beg you, do not erase. Please, do not erase. Okay? Now, I'm going to erase this right here. Yes? Okay, let's see what else we need to talk about. Okay. Glycogenesis. 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 Glyco means what? Sugar. What does genesis mean?
Beginning.
In the beginning, right? Yes. Making sugar, right? You're making glycogen, right? All it is a sugar molecule hooked to a sugar molecule, hooked to a sugar molecule, and we put a phosphate on the end so it doesn't escape the cell, right? Now, conversely, glycogenolysis. What is glycogenolysis. What does that mean? We're splitting glycogen, right? Okay? When our blood sugar, we're running. After a while, our blood sugar gets low. Glucagon. We need glucagon because why? Because the glucose is all gone, right? And it gets this glycogen out of our cells and splits off that phosphate, so we have the sugar to raise our blood sugar so we can keep running, right? This is glycogen splitting. Okay, right? Now, the next one, gluconeogenesis. Gluco for sugar. Neo means what?
No.
New. New sugar. Making new sugar, right? Yes? This is where we make glucose out of protein, right? And remember we said the body, that's a very expensive process. We don't like to do that. When we want to take the protein and make big muscles out of it. We don't want to burn it in every cell to keep us going. So gluconeogenesis. Where does gluconeogenesis happen? Mainly, not totally, but mainly in the liver. In your liver, right? Yes? In your liver, mainly. Yes? It's an expensive process. Okay. Now, let me ask you a question. Okay? Do you have to have some protein in your diet? Yes. Yes. Do you have to have some fat in your diet?
Yes.
Yes, right? They're essential fatty acids. You have to eat them. They're called essential Because our body can't make them. Our body's so amazing, this liver does 1,000 chemical reactions at least, and it can make certain fats and fatty acids, but there are certain ones called essential that, guess what? I gotta eat. Yes? I forgot to take my fish oil today. Dang. But anyway, right? Essential fatty acids, right? Gotta have so much protein. If you don't have so much protein, you break down the protein in your body and you die, right? That's what happens. Yes? You gotta eat protein. Fats, you gotta have those essential fatty acids. You gotta have them, your body can't make them. You have to have them. Okay? Now, number 3, the big 3, right? The macros. The third one is carbs, right? Carbohydrates. Yes? Now, there is an RDA, recommended daily allowance of protein, right? For an average sized person, needs to eat so much protein to keep going, right? And if you're a great big man, you need more protein than a little scrawny guy like me, right? Okay? Same for RDA for certain fats, okay? Gotta have certain fats. Everybody needs so much. A bigger person needs more than a smaller person, but right? Gotta have these essential fatty acids, yes? Now, here's my question. What is the RDA for carbohydrates? Anybody want to guess?
200 grams.
Okay. Too high. Anybody else? Too high. Anybody else?
0.
Goose egg, right? There are no essential carbohydrates. You do not have to eat 0 carbohydrates. Why is that? Gluconeogenesis, right? Yes? Okay, you know about keto, right? People eat very, very low carbohydrates. Yes, I'm a low carber myself. The keto people are extremely low, right? And the carnivores do what? They don't eat any carbs, right? If all you eat is eggs, bacon, and red meat, right? Chicken, right? You're not getting any carbs, or almost no carbs. There's no RDA of carbohydrates because of gluconeogenesis. Because anytime we're running low, guess what? Liver goes, oh, I better make some carbs. I better make some glucose, right? So that's what gluconeogenesis is. So the people that eat carnivore, right? If they need sugar, yes. Oh, by the way, nerve cells, brain and spinal cord especially, thrives on sugar, right? Okay. But guess what? If you get too low, your liver just makes it, right? Same with, what about if you're worried about your cholesterol and you go, darn, I'm not eating any cholesterol, and all you eat is lettuce and green peppers and carrots, okay, peas, green beans. None of those have cholesterol. What happens? Guess what your liver does? Your liver makes it, right? Right? It's almost impossible to stop eating cholesterol and lower your cholesterol. Why? Because it's genetically determined. It's a feedback loop. And if you stop eating it, Mr. Liver starts making it. That's what happens. Okay? Right? Okay? So, gluconeogenesis. Got to get that concept, right? It's talked about a lot if you're a low carber or such. But anyway, you got to know what that is, right? You got to have some protein and you got to have some fat in your diet, but you do not have to eat carbs. Okay, right? It's not essential. Okay. Lipogenesis. Lipogenesis. Lipogenesis, right? That means the making of, right, fat. Yes, right? Lipolysis, lipolysis. I've heard this said a different way, right? That's the fat splitting, right? That's what you want if you want to lose weight. Lipolysis. Okay? Lipogenesis, making fat, right? Remember, eat a bunch of carbs, your blood sugar's tanked up, your glycogen levels are tanked up, start making triglycerides, trigs, right? In your blood, that's where they come from, yes? Right? Before I was a low carber, my trigs were 300, right? Normal is 50 to 100. Normal is 50 to 100, mine were 300. I had some blood work on my mom from years ago, guess what? Hers were high too, and I thought, darn, I just inherited that. Thanks, Mom. I really appreciate that, right? But then after several months going low carb, I had my trigs checked, and guess what they were? 75, right? What's normal? 50 to 100, right? But anyway, okay, I didn't inherit anything. I was just eating crap. But anyway, yes, here we go. Okay? Now, make sure you know all these words. It'd be really helpful on the final if you know all these words. Right? Be really helpful. I'm just saying. Okay? Okay. Now, for some reason they threw in about body temperature too. Let's talk about body temperature. Okay? Body temp is controlled by the hypothalamus, right? Remember? Thalamus gateway to the cerebral cortex. Yes, nothing gets up here unless it goes through the hypothalamus, right? But below that is the thalamus. Below that is the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is where so many of the autonomic nervous system controls are, right? Yes, in the hypothalamus, and then lower down into the brain there, the brainstem. But anyway, hypothalamus, right? That's where appetite is determined. That's where heart rate and such. Okay? Okay. Heat promoting mechanisms, right? Heat promoting mechanisms. Okay? If you start getting cold, right? Heat, H-E-A-T, promoting. Okay? Right. You start getting cold, what happens? First thing is, right? Yes. The cutaneous, the ones on the surface, blood vessels in our arms and our legs, what do? They vasoconstrict, right? What does that do? That sends blood to the core, right? Because let me explain. I can live without fingers. I can live without toes. I can't live without a brain or a spinal cord, right? So when we start getting cold, our extremities get cold first. Yes? Okay? Constriction of cutaneous blood vessels to keep the core warm, right? Number two, the second thing that happens is, right? We start shivering. And when we shiver, we contract and then relax quickly muscles. And when we contract and relax muscles quickly, what does it generate? Heat, right? You start lifting weights, you'll start sweating. Yes? Right? That's why they wear the muscle shirts, right? Because they're hot, right? No, they wear them to show off the muscles. That's why. But anyway, yes. Number three, we increase metabolic rate. Okay? We increase metabolic rate. All those things that we're talking about to make more energy, to produce more heat, right? We increase the metabolic rate. Yes? Can you say epinephrine, norepinephrine, right? Adrenaline, noradrenaline, right? Speed our heart rate up, get us warm. Yes? Okay? Now, enhanced thyroxine release. Okay? If we're in a cold climate for very long, our thyroid will start cranking out more T3 and T4 to produce more heat. Okay? I've told you guys this before. If we move from here to Alaska, that first winter would be really tough. The second winter, we'd be used to it because our thyroid would be cranking out a lot more. T3 and T4, we'd be producing more heat, right? And such. Okay? Okay. Number 5, behavioral modification, right? Behavioral modification. I got a 2-pound sleeping bag. It's down, and it says it's good to 20 degrees. You know, is it really good to 20 degrees? No, I'm cold-natured. I don't have much insulation, right? So it's common inside the bag. Number 1, I got my beanie on to keep my head warm. Number 2, I got my vest on inside my sleeping bag, right? And number 3, I got the zipper pocket right here on the vest to put my phone in there because it ain't good to get your phone really, really cold unless you want to screw the battery up and lose battery, right? Yes, you might need it for emergency, so I want to keep that phone warm, so I keep the phone right there. Yes. Behavioral modification. I'm cold, I put on a jacket, right? Yes. I'm cold in the sleeping bag. Oh, by the way, I take my jacket sometimes and lay it over me inside the sleeping bag to keep my chest even warmer, right? Because 2 pounds, that thing's about as big as a coconut when you crush it all down. It's not very big. Anyway, yes. Okay? Now, remember too, we talked about the radiator fluid in your body is blood, right? And when we get cold, the blood goes to the core. But when we get hot, where does the blood go? To the surface. Our face gets red, and we radiate that heat off our skin, right? That's how we cool ourselves down, and we start sweating, right? And we're hot, and we're sweating, and the water evaporates, and it acts like a swamp cooler and cools us off, right? Unless it's super humid. I grew up right outside Houston. It's hot and steamy down there. It sucks. But anyway, right? So if we get too hot, we'll dilate those cutaneous blood vessels, and we will sweat more. Okay? We continue to get hot. Okay, we have to be careful. We have to be careful because we will get heat exhaustion. Heatexhaustion. Heat exhaustion. Right? Okay? When we're getting heat exhaustion, we do some extreme sweating. Okay? We get elevated body temp, right? We can get mental confusion. We can faint, right? Now, the mental confusion, the fainting, right? It's due to dehydration. Those are due to dehydration. Oh, by the way, what happens if we sweat out all our water? We get dehydrated, yes? What is the main determinant of your blood pressure? How much water is in the circulatory system, right? So if we sweat and we lose a bunch of water and we're dehydrated, right? Yes? Our pulse will be thready and our blood pressure will be low. And when your blood pressure is real low, you can faint real easily, right? Yes? Okay. That's heat exhaustion, right? I was exercising one time years ago down in the lake, and I got way too hot. I got this, and I sweated so much, and I'm sure my temperature was high, and I was confused. I was walking down Den Rock. I live on Den Rock, right? And I would walk by people's houses, and I would see. I'm like, I wonder if I could go up there and get water out of their hose. I wonder if it's on. I wonder if they'll shoot me. I'm so hot. I'm so thirsty, right? I felt like I was going to faint. When I got home, I had to drink a big glass of ice water, and I laid down for 3 hours and felt like crap. I'm telling you, right? But heat exhaustion can go into heat stroke, okay? Heat stroke, okay? Right? Hyperthermia. The temperature above 105 degrees Fahrenheit or 41 Celsius. Okay? Heat stroke. Yes? So what happens is this screws up the hypothalamus. It kind of loses its ability and you start getting hotter and hotter. Okay? Your temperature goes up, your metabolic rate goes up, and you start your heat production goes up, right? And get this, your skin is hot and dry. Your skin's hot and dry, okay? You're past the point of sweating. You're too hot, okay? Your autonomic nervous system is not working good anymore. It's not controlling your temperature and you're not sweating anymore, okay? Now, this can be fatal, right? Yes. If your kid gets too hot, you put them in the bathtub with tepid water with no clothes on, right? Yes. Hospital where I worked at when I was in college, yes. They stripped them down, shoved a rectal probe up them, and then they put a blanket across them. But the blanket ran through a big machine. It was like this big, right? And it cooled the water, and then that cool water ran through the blanket and back into the machine, right? To cool them down quickly. Yes. Okay? Heat stroke. Make sure you get the difference. Heat exhaustion, boy, you're sweating a ton. Heat stroke, no, your skin is dry. Okay? You're way hot. Okay? Okay. Okay. By the way, when we get older, remember how we talked about in one chapter, as we get older, we have less water than we used to. When we're younger, especially men, they got more muscle, right? And they carry much more water. But as we get older, we carry less and less and less water, and that's why it's very important. Old people, they don't have as much water, and they can't take the heat like when they were younger. Okay? They can't. So they get dehydrated very easily. They get dehydrated, they feel bad, they fall down, all kinds of stuff like that. Right? Your folks, your grandparents, if the air conditioner breaks at their house, right? Yes, you bring them to your house. You keep them in the air conditioner, especially if you live in Houston or Dallas, trust me, right? It's very dangerous. Oh, by the way, when I was a kid in Houston, we didn't have an air conditioner. Man, you want to talk major side factor, but anyway, yes. Okay, there we go, right? So, yes, right? That's why I'm a big fan of education, right? Yes, because I live in a much nicer house, I eat much better food, I have nicer vehicles, right? I'm going to have a good retirement in a couple of years when I choose to retire, right? All because I got myself an education, right? Yes, I'm just saying, right? But maybe you're good at sales, like my wife, you don't have to. You better be good at something, yes? My son Dave, very good with his hands, electrical guy, right? But anyway, okay. Sorry, got off on a tangent there. Yes? Now let's talk about the opposite, hypothermia. Hypothermia. Hypothermia, right? Yes, low body temperature. Yes? What happens is your vital signs decrease. Yes? Next thing that happens is you You get drowsy. And then in time you get comfortable, yes. When you get down to 87 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit, right? You stop shivering. Stop, S-T-O-P. You stop shivering when you get 87 to 90, right? The next step is you go into a coma, right? What do you die of, by the way? Lack of oxygen. No. What do you die of? Think about it. You're getting colder and colder and colder. Well, you're getting closer. See, what happens is you usually die of cardiac arrest. Right? See, what happens is you get arrhythmias develop. Arrhythmias, right? We talked about AFib. And AFib, you're not feeling too good, but you get VFib, and boom, 3 or 4 minutes, you're falling on the ground. You're dead if you go into VFib, right? Unless somebody knows CPR, okay? So, usually when you get down to about 70 degrees Fahrenheit, that's when you die, okay? Now, let's talk about this, okay? Your vital signs go down and you get drowsy, right? Drowsy, you get sleepy. So, if you're in this situation, what do you do? And you know, uh-oh, drowsy, that means I'm getting too cold. What do? You get up and move around or do whatever you have to do. You stay awake. You do not let yourself. If you let yourself go to sleep, you're going to die. It's very simple. Okay? Right? Backpackers, like me, climbing mountains, I've had hypothermia before too, and such. But anyway, you get drowsy, but then after a period of time, you get comfortable. Did you know people that die of hypothermia in the backcountry? It's very common. They get comfortable and then they take all their clothes off. It's very common for rescuers to come up and they die and they have no clothes on, right? Because they were comfortable. They didn't feel cold anymore. Very common. Okay? Again, you stop shivering, you go into a coma, your heart stops. Okay? Goes arrhythmia. Yes? So, my point being is, if you're in that situation, you start getting drowsy, do not let yourself go to sleep. I watched one, I Shouldn't Be Alive. It's these 2 gals in New Zealand. One was experienced climber, and she was an idiot, but she was an experienced climber, and she took this other gal who had no business being there. And they got stuck on a ledge in a rainstorm. Their sleeping bags got wet, and they were soaked, and this and that. And it rained for 10 days, and they were up there for 9 or 10 days. And the one lady that was experienced climber, yeah, the other gal started going to sleep, and she's punching her. You can't go to sleep, saving her life by punching her, you know, and such. But anyway, it's very common. It's very common. Yes. The time I got hypothermia, I got these new pants, and they were called what were they? Adventure pants, right? And I'm climbing a mountain with my son Dave, and we're 4 hours from the truck, and it starts raining. So I put my rain jacket on, and I thought there was a durable water treatment, DWR treatment on the pants. Guess what? There wasn't. So the pants soaked through, and we're way above tree line. And so in the storm, there's no trees to get under anything. So I went over next to a rock, and the rock had a little curve. You know, the front of the rock was about this tall, but it was kind of curved in like that. So I went over there and I squatted down like this to try and get out of the weather. When I squatted down like that, guess what happened? My pants were all soaked, and the water went running down, and my fanny was lower than my knees. And guess what I had after that? I had soaking underwear. And I'm 4 hours from the truck, and I'm shivering, right? But we're only 30 or 40 minutes from the top. And thank God my son had good rain gear on. But I thought the weather pants are brand new, super duper. I paid a lot of money for them. I thought they were, yeah, I was wrong. Yes. So I had to call it and say, no, sorry, we're going down. We're going to have to come back. And we had spent 4 hours trying to get to the top, right? And so we turned around and went down as fast as I could go, just as fast as I could go, because I was trying to generate heat. Yes. And 4 hours later, I got to the truck and I was shivering just almost uncontrollably. And I started the truck. And I always, when I get off the mountain, put on clean clothes because the clothes I'm wearing don't smell too good. Go figure. But anyway, so I put on dry clothes and I had started the truck immediately. So the truck warmed up and I turned the heater on full blast. And it took an hour before I stopped shivering. Okay? Yes. Right? Now I wear Gore-Tex pants and they're not getting wet through. And they're hot. A lot of times they're hot. But you know what? I had hypothermia before. I'm not doing that again. Yes. And my jacket, yeah, I have top of the line jacket. I have some real expensive Gore-Tex jackets because my wife says I'm worth a lot, right? Yeah. So she doesn't mind it when I buy the expensive rain gear because she don't want to lose me, right? Yes. And so anyway, hypothermia, it's very serious. Oh, by the way, what state, I may have already asked you this, what state gets more cases of hypothermia than any other? Alaska, that's a very good guess, but no. Pennsylvania, no, not Pennsylvania. It does get colder though, right?
Maine.
Maine, that's a very good guess also, but wrong.
Wisconsin.
No, that's a good guess also, but not wrong, but wrong.
Wyoming.
Wyoming, that's a good guess. It gets cold there too.
South Dakota.
South Dakota, very cold state. Yes, right? Which state?
Colorado.
Colorado, that's also a good guess, but no, not Colorado, right?
New York.
New York State, no, not New York State either. Guess who gets more hypothermia cases than anywhere else? What state? Florida. Florida. Well, why in the HE double hockey sticks would that be, right?
The ocean water.
They go out on their boat and they got shorts and a t-shirt on, right? And it rains on them and they're 30 miles off the coast. Or they go hiking in the Everglades and it's hotter than blazes and they got a shirt and shorts on and they're cotton. Cotton. What do the rescuers call cotton cloth, by the way? What do search and rescue people call cotton cloth? Death cloth. I'm not joking, right? You get a cotton shirt wet and it stays wet a long time and it sucks your body heat away, right? That's why I always wear polyester. All the search and rescue guys always wear polyester shirts. Never, ever, ever cotton, right? And that's why too, it was about 3 weeks ago, I was almost to the top of Harvard, Mount Harvard, right? No, I take that back. We had done it, Ben and I, we tagged it, and we were on the way down, and there's a guy coming up, and guess what the guy has? Got a big brim hat on, no shirt, shorts, sneakers, little water bottle like this. Going up that mountain, and it's gray and cloudy, and it's starting to rain. Right? Right? There's always one idiot. And before we got off that mountain, we got rained on pretty good. Yes? And guess what that guy probably got? Hypothermia. Yes. What an idiot. What an idiot. See, if the weather's perfect, it's no big deal. But in the mountains, the weather can turn like that, right? And all of a sudden, if you don't have your jacket, if you don't have your rain gear, if you don't have extra layers to put on, you're in big trouble, right? Years ago, I climbed this one mountain and I got to the top and I got on top and I looked, oh, shucks. Here comes this tremendous storm. And the top was hands and feet. I mean, it wasn't a trail. I was hands and feet. And I was getting off as fast as I could. And it started hailing on me. Then it started sleeting on me. Then it started raining on me. It was the worst storm I'd ever been in. There was a guy coming up, a young fellow, you know, and I was coming down, and the storm hadn't hit yet. And I said, man, there's a storm coming. You better tag it and get the little hockey sticks off fast, man. And this guy was a monkey. I'm telling you, he was up there, and he passed me on the way down. And finally, it took 30 or 40 minutes to where he got down to where it's hiking, you know. He was way gone. I saw him the next day. He's like, oh, man, I was worried about you, you know. I'm like, yeah, that's the worst storm I've ever been in. But I had good rain gear on. But the problem was, it was hands and feet, and there's no place to sit down and put your rain gear on. So I got soaked, and I had to make a decision. Okay, do I take all my clothes off and then put my rain gear on and put all my wet clothes in my backpack? Or do I keep going and generate body heat, right? So I had to decide what to do, what's the wisest thing to do, and I decided to haul balls, man, as fast as I could to get off of that thing and generate some heat, because I had hypothermia before. It's not fun. It's not fun at all. And I got back down to the tent and stripped everything off and hung it up in the tent and lay there for a couple hours in the sleeping bag. But anyway, right? Hypothermia is not something to mess with. You know, if you're from Alaska, guess what? You know you don't go anywhere without your jacket. If you're from Montana, you're not stupid. You know a storm can show up at any moment, right? If you're from Montana, in the backseat of your truck, there's a pair of coveralls, I guarantee you, because the people are smart, because they know how to deal with the weather, because it gets very bad weather there. So the most hypothermia cases are not up there in the cold states. They are, right? South Dakota rancher knows how to dress and knows all of a sudden the storm can hit just like that and be snowing on them. I've been snowed on in August in the middle of Colorado. But anyway, okay, sorry. Fever, right? What causes fever? What's the first thing we think of when we think of fever? Don't answer. Infection. Infection, right? Illness. Infection. Yes, that's the first thing. But there are several other things, like that you know when we get cancer, it's very common people to have an uncontrolled fever, right? Yes. Some people get hot when they have allergic reaction, or if you have an injury to your central nervous system. Yes, right? You're one of these geniuses that rides a motorcycle without a helmet on. You hit your head on the curb. Okay? Very painful, by the way. Ask me how I know. And I had the helmet on. But anyway, so that can throw off your thermostat too. So it's not just infection, but that's the first thing we think of. Oh, infection, right? Remember, we have a lymphocyte called a monocyte, right? Monocyte. And then when it goes in the tissue, we call it a M-A-C-R-O, macrophage, the big eaters. And they will give off inflammatory chemicals, you know, the cytokines. We talked about that, cytokines, but also pyrogens, P-Y-R-O-G-E-N-S. Okay, Joseph, I want to ask you, because you know, what's a pyromaniac? What's he like to do?
Play with fire.
Play with fire. Pyromaniacs. Pyrogen. Hot, right? Yes. So those cells will release chemicals that are pyrogens. So our fever goes up. Fever's not a bad thing. Fever's a good thing. It's when fever gets out of control, and when it goes up very quickly, is when it's bad. Okay? Right? Fever, it acts on the hypothalamus, the pyrogens. okay? And it resets the thermostat from 98.6 to 99.6 to 101.6 and such, okay? Okay? Yes. And it will stay up until the problem is over, the germs are killed, right? Germs that infect humans like to live at 98.6. So if you're 102, they don't like that. They have trouble reproducing when the temperature is much hotter than that, okay? And such. So it's a body defense mechanism, right? And, or if you take Tylenol or one of the fever reducers, right? Aspirin, Tylenol will bring your fever down, right? And you folks know not to give aspirin to little children, right? Rett syndrome. Yes, you give a kid ibuprofen or Tylenol. But anyway, right? Now, two, again, I've told you this before, I was talking about pediatrician. You watch the fever in a little child. If it shoots up real high, that's very scary. But if it goes up gradually and it doesn't get extremely high, the pediatrician said, I treat children, I don't treat thermometers, right? And he based his intervention on how the child was acting. If the kid's cranky and gripey and he's playing and throwing trucks at his brother, he said everything's fine. But if the kid's just hanging on to mom, turn it, that's when it's scary. That's when you give the kids medicine. But anyway, that was a rule of thumb that I was taught 40 years ago by a pediatrician. I'll think his name in just a minute. But anyway, yep. Fever increases the metabolic rate. All those white blood cells go crazy. Boom, 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 boom. They get supercharged, okay? That is another reason I watched Dr. Seaholt, MD with the MedCram guy, and he talked about that. That stimulates those T cells, those B cells to crank them out. Yes? The high fever inhibits bacterial growth, and it stimulates the immune response. Stimulates the immune response. Right? Yes. Okay. Alrighty. Amazing stuff, isn't that? Amazing. Every cell of your body can do that. Yes. Okay. See y'all tomorrow, and we will probably do lab tomorrow. We'll probably do club tomorrow. Okay? So, thank y'all. Have a good evening. Yes? I should have done what you said. I should have gone to Taco Bell, right?
I tell you what.
I should have hit the Taco Bell.
A bell?
Yeah. Man.